first.
Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew: Keith Johnson.
How's it going, guys?
Alan Seiler.
Books, young man, books. Thousands of them. If time wasn't so important, I'd show you something. My library. Thousands of books.
No lie. I was just about to say that. And 2 seconds before, I did not say it.
You know what? And as soon as I thought about saying that one, I thought, I bet you Keith's going to do that one.
That's great.
Have a backup. And we're joined by a special guest tonight. Victoria Avalon is with us today. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank
Welcome.
you so much for joining us.
I'm afraid I don't have any catchphrases like Alan had.
That's all right. And I've known you for a long time, but you are a writer, an actress in fan films. That's sort of your fandom. Very knowledgeable about Star Trek, but also in your day job, you're a lawyer.
I am.
And I've read many very detailed, interesting legal analyses that you write on your Facebook page. And we were talking a while back about doing this. You're talking about the courtroom episodes of Star Trek. And I was like, well, I need to get Victoria to come on because she'd be perfect. You know a lot about Star Trek and you know way more than we do about the law. So I thought that'd be interesting. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
I'm glad to help.
Yeah. Now, how do we want to phrase this, guys? Did you guys have episodes in specific that you wanted to start with, or do we want to start with Victoria? And
I would say, Victoria,
Yeah,
what do you
think? A little bit about your background.
Well, that, yes. And a little bit about how you got into Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Charles is right. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in Illinois and in Florida, and I practice in Florida. Primarily criminal law and appeals or appellate actions. My greatest experience is in post-conviction litigation, and I've done that for about 23 years. I've been a Star Trek fan since the original series. I can remember being very young in 1969. Kindergarten age or less. I don't want to give too much away, I think. But I was not allowed to be up at 10 o'clock at night.
Uh-oh.
So my parents would be watching the show, and I'd hear the theme song, and I would sneak out and hide behind the couch. I could watch it.
That's awesome.
And of course, in the 70s, when I was in elementary school and in junior high school, the show was in syndication, and it was on every day. It seemed like. So I would come and I would watch it when I would get home from school, and the animated series. I would get up early every Saturday morning so I could catch it because I loved it. I mean, I had a crush on Captain Kirk when I was younger, and I loved it. And I've seen all the movies in the theaters when they came out, and beginning with the first one. And the first fan fiction I saw was the original Exeter Trek, not all of it, or Starship Exeter, what the
Right.
Johnsons did. Fantastic work.
Oh, yeah.
Holds up to this day. And that was the first thing that I saw, and I loved it. And of course, I saw some of the early New Voyages. I thought James Cawley was a much better Kirk than people gave him credit for at the time.
Right.
But he did very well. I enjoyed those very much. And I discovered Starship Farragut in 2012. They had just put up For Want of a Nail. And I watched it on YouTube. And at the end of it, they had a web address for their website at the time. And I went to the website, got an email address for the administrator. I realized that the studio was only about 4 hours away from where I lived at the time. And I figured that, why not? I'll send these people an email and see if they need any help, because they're still in the middle of construction, according to their news updates. And I didn't think I would hear back. 30 minutes after I sent the email, my cell phone's ringing.
Wow.
It was John Broughton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Straight to the top.
Wow. I'm hearing from Captain Carter.
Right.
And at the time, Holly Bednar was our personnel director. And I came on to assist with construction. And the first time I walked into the Kingsland studio, they had the bridge up, and that was it. That was in the middle of 2012. And I was there when the corridor was put up. I helped plan the sick bay. I helped plan the captain's quarters. In fact, there's some funny stories about that. Mike Bednar is incredible when it comes to detail. He's all about the details. He's a modeler and incredibly talented. And I can remember when we put together the captain's cabin, we all were staying there late, and we had this all-night debate about exactly how high the captain's bed was off the floor. And it got to the point where we took protractors and put on the one of the episodes, the one with the Scalosians, where they drink the water and they slow down or speed up.
Wink of an eye.
Wink of an eye. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it. And we had that on, and that scene where he's in his quarters with the Scalosian girl, and we're on this little television with protractors, right, taking angles and doing math, and I can't add 2 and 2 and get 4 twice running, dude. I'm a lawyer. I mean, I'm not an engineer. And what the upshot of it was is that Mike had one idea, and Royal, who was our chief of construction, had another, and Royal ended up being right. We never let Mike live it down. And that's the story behind why the bed is the height that it is. I mean, Mike is very painstaking, and he is the god of detail. The Kingsland sets look the way that they do because of Mike Bednar.
Right.
And he does not get the credit that he should.
Yeah.
Had you done acting before you got involved? Had you done theater and so forth in school and things like that? Or was this the first time you got into something like that?
Well, every trial lawyer is a ham actor. And if they say otherwise, they're lying. But no, I didn't do any amateur acting at all until I started doing films.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know, and just really quick, like if you can name which Star Trek series is your favorite?
Which series?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the ones that are the original.
I thought you might say that.
First season TOS.
Mine
When
too.
First season.
Writing, if you pay very close attention, Charles used to call me out on this because he used to edit my scripts. I write first season TOS.
Yeah. And I don't blame you, because that's my favorite season of all Star Trek, is that first season of the original series. I don't think they ever topped that. Well, and speaking of first season of the original series, I mean, that's where we get the first trial episode in Star Trek. Obviously, we got a lot of firsts that year. Right. And I was thinking about it before we came on, and I don't want to go through all these episodes and say, is this realistic? Is this realistic? And you say, no.
Not a single one of them is realistic. None of them.
Right.
Although there's one in Next Gen where the drumhead, right?
That's one of my favorites.
You've got Picard actually citing cases. He cited a case. He quoted like the interrogator's father had been a judge, I guess, and he's quoting an opinion that this judge had written. So I mean, that's the only time I've ever seen anything like that in Star Trek. That was great.
I have a question before we talk about specifically how you feel about shows. Are you familiar with Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Oh, he is my hero. I love him.
Yeah, well, you probably know that Neil deGrasse Tyson is famous for not being able to watch a movie without making a comment on something weird. Like, he watched Titanic, and he famously posted that the stars in the Titanic were wrong for the time and the year. And James Cameron actually had to seriously redo the stars. And he's always doing that.
He is totally the only one that would ever even notice that.
Yes.
He would notice it too.
Right. So I was wondering, he can't watch a movie where the astronomy part is not correct. When you watch legal shows or legal episodes in Star Trek, does it irritate you? Does it bother you?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So
my husband is a Law and Order fan. He loves it. And he used to watch the original Law and Order and early SVU. He doesn't like current, but he liked early. And he would have it on, and I'd be in the kitchen doing whatever, or and he got to the point where he couldn't. In the house we were living in at the time, there was a pass-through between the kitchen and the living room where the television was. And I'd be working on something in the kitchen or making something to eat, and he'd have Law and Order on in the other room. And at the time, I was a trial attorney, and in our office, and I couldn't stop hollering, "Objection sustained, overruled." That's a stupid ruling. No judge would rule like that. He got to the point where he was like, "Will you just shut up? I can't stand it. I really can't." And I mean, I really have to give, especially Law and Order, I have to give them a break, because part of the problem is I know procedure in the states I'm licensed in, and I don't have a clue how watching them do a suppression hearing in chambers, which apparently is a thing in New York State. That's utterly foreign in Florida. I mean, you would not ever see that, and that just didn't make any sense to me. But that's a procedural vagary apparently there up there, and so I've got to give them a break for that. But I mean, Jack McCoy does things that would get me disbarred, and there are a lot of I mean, I've ridden the line pretty close sometimes for things that would get me in trouble with the bench, but not like that.
So when you watch Star Trek, then, and you watch these legal episodes, you can't not see what you would think is incorrect and how the law is carried out.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's obvious what they're trying to do. They're trying to mimic court-martial practice. And I'm not an expert in military law. I mean, I did stay on a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I did take, when I was in law school, I went to Stetson University in DeLand, in the main campus.
So did I. I went to Stetson.
You're a Stetson guy?
Yes.
Well, I went to the law school in Gulfport. I
was a music major, so I was in DeLand.
Well, you were in DeLand. I went to the law school in Gulfport.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
And
God, this is horrible.
Go Hatters.
As a
Yeah, go
Texan, I only
Hatters.
know
Yeah,
Stetson is
straight
something to
up.
wear.
Well, and that's why
Well, I
our
mean, I've
teams are called
completely
the
lost
Hatters.
my train of thought. When you get to be
Okay.
my age, that happens. But
But you were mentioning how you watch the Star Trek episodes and you
Oh.
can't not edit, but also their military law often in
well,
Star
that's what
Trek.
I'm saying. I took
Mhm.
military law when I was at
Mhm.
2L at Stetson, and I was in the military, so I've got some familiarity with procedures in the Army, at least, and I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to mimic naval procedure, and they do a terrible job of it. But they're trying. They're trying.
But
Yeah.
surely there are some episodes or some writers who get it better than others, right?
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
you see variations, and they're not all like, "Oh, this is the worst courtroom I've ever seen." But some of them, which ones can you think of that came closer to right than other than Drumhead?
Well, I like that because of how Patrick Stewart handled quoting that case back. I mean, he's so incredibly dignified. I
Yes.
love his portrayal. It's just amazing. I found the hearing that they did in Measure of a Man interesting.
Yeah.
The way that they went about doing that. As far as the sobriety of the procedure, Menagerie,
Okay.
I thought they did a good job there. The Strange New Worlds episode that they had past season,
Ad Astra per Aspera.
I thought they did a credible job there, or they tried.
Mhm.
Although I question the way that they went about recruiting the defense lawyer and some of the things that she did. That to me, some of what she did strained the bounds of ethics. But then again, she didn't care. So
I was pleased that they had a defense lawyer. Because usually it's just like your attorneys. Let's go.
Right.
not true. That does not happen in the military. The military has a judge advocate general's office.
Yes.
Right.
And they represent. In fact, I've got a friend who's an Air Force judge advocate, and he's the regional defense counsel for Southeast U.S. For the Air Force, and his experience was as a prosecutor, but now he's the head defense lawyer. He's working out of one of the Air Force bases in Georgia. I don't remember which one it is right offhand, but that's his job is to defend Air Force servicemen and women who are accused of violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Right.
And I would think that Starfleet, as a quasi-military organization, would have some form of uniform code.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we never hear about it.
Yeah.
You make a point, because one of the funny things that people talk about with the Measure of a Man is how they say that the lady who he knew, the one who prosecuted Picard for the Stargazer incident, she basically says, well, it's a brand new office, so I don't have any staff. So she looks at Jean-Luc and said, so you're going to defend Data. And then she grabs Riker and says, you're going to prosecute. And Riker says, I won't do it. He's my friend. I respect him. She goes, okay, then I will summarily judge against him. Like, I hope it doesn't work that way.
That's incredibly unrealistic.
Like,
and
what if we all wait 6 weeks for someone to arrive?
When I suggest to you that I like the way that worked out, I'm talking about what happened in the courtroom itself.
Right.
I mean, it's off the chain, because both Picard and Riker had major conflicts. And in reality, they wouldn't be asked to do that.
Right.
More likely, they'd pack Data off to the nearest large star base instead of, he'd get there in 6 months, because they'd be witnesses, man.
Right.
Yes.
That was crazy. She should have been suspended for that, frankly.
Yeah.
But what actually went on in the hearing room?
Yes.
I thought it was sober. I mean, people think that court is crazy. Well, yeah, there are crazy moments in court, but mostly when we go to a trial, especially a criminal trial, there are very few surprises, because we have a discovery process. especially if it's a very serious case. I've done capital litigation, and in cases like that, it takes 2 or 3 years to get to trial.
Right.
And by that time, you've gone through, I mean, you've deposed dozens of people. You've, in Florida at least, not all states do depositions, but Florida does. And you've gone through all of that. You've provided the defense with everything that you have, all the reports, all the documents, the things have been tested. There aren't any surprises. The system is designed to prevent surprise. And when, particularly, I'm speaking as a prosecutor now, when we get in trouble is when we don't disclose things to the defense. There are certain obligations at law and special responsibilities a prosecutor has. And that's designed to prevent surprise. No one wants to do trial by ambush. I know that's one of the things that bothers me. I don't want to do to my colleague what I don't want done to myself. And the primary jurisdiction that I practice in, I've been in for many years, and because of that, I have relationships with the opposing bar, and that helps a lot. I mean, we exchange information, and because no one wants to be surprised. We don't do ambush tactics in the law. That leads to bad outcomes for the client. It leads to bad outcomes for my client.
Right.
You know, we don't work that way, and lawyers that do are typically not very successful.
Well, most lawyers working in a courtroom don't have to worry about making good television drama.
Yeah.
Well, that's also true, and that's one reason. As a practicing attorney, I can't stand it. When I've been in high profile cases many times, and I've been in courtrooms full of cameras, and it changes the way everyone works. I work for a government agency, and well, not to put too fine a face on it, I'm a state prosecutor. And I've been in situations where I've walked into a courtroom full of cameras. It changes the way everybody talks. And then I don't let it change what I do. And unfortunately, I've learned that I'm somewhat quotable. I can remember in one instance, I was trying a case many years ago. And I was giving opening statement to the jury, and wasn't paying any attention to the cameras in the room like usual. And one of the things that I did at the time, I mean, everybody's got their little theatrical shtick, and mine is to, you know, one of the things I used to do would be to turn and point at the defendant. That's the guy that did it, you know. And so I'm telling the jury that right there are the hands that did blah, 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 you know. And as soon as I turned and pointed at the guy, I heard click, 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 click. Sure enough, it was the local newspaper reporter. I ended up on page 1 of the Nation State section of the local newspaper pointing at the defendant, you know. And of course, I was pretty tight with the local police department, or the sheriff's office that was that had investigated the case. And of course, if you know anything about cops, they do have a great sense of humor. And that picture I got plastered all over my office. And they did not let me live it down for years. I mean, it's just terrible. Not only that, but I had to explain it to my elected official too. So that was a lot of fun. And I've done things like that. I mean, I'll throw some remark off. I had a post-conviction case years ago where I was going back and forth with a defense witness who the gist of what I was trying to get across was this guy was doing life and had no reason to tell the truth. And so, you know, I was in the moment, not paying attention to what I was saying. And one of the questions I asked him was, "You're going to die behind a chain link fence, aren't you?" And that one went viral. And let's just say that it was not appreciated.
Right. You know, an interesting thing about we were talking about Measure of a Man. The interesting thing about that one, it was written by a woman called Melinda Snodgrass. She has a legal background.
Sure.
Yeah, and
you can tell. You can tell by the way that they were acting in the hearing room.
Yes, and what you call it? court martial from the original series was written by a guy who wrote for a lot of television shows at that time, legal shows.
Right.
So, I mean, they have a pedigree coming into these things. And I've always wondered about how that changes, you know, what we see on the screen. If it's somebody who's just writing because they're a writer, or somebody who's writing because they have experience in these fields.
Mm-hmm.
Well, keep in mind that what they're trying to do, they're trying to create drama, and they're trying to tell a story.
Yes.
And they want to give it a flavor of verisimilitude,
Yes.
but they don't want the reality to bog down the story.
Yeah.
So do things like have the drama of Riker having to prosecute his friend,
Right.
that kind of thing, which would never happen in real life. But that's a dramatic artifice, and they would do things like that. And I can see doing things like that. I might try something like that if I was writing a courtroom episode for a fan film, to create drama.
Mm-hmm.
Or lead witness being, having that problem where they've got to testify to something that if they're truthful, it's going to hurt someone they care about.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because like my favorite lawyer in all of Star Trek is Samuel T. Cogley, attorney at law. He also may be the worst lawyer in all of Star Trek, in my opinion, because all he says is no questions, no questions, no questions. And only because at the end Spock runs in and realizes the computer has been hacked, then he gives this awesome speech. And that's kind of it.
Well, that's not necessarily being a bad lawyer. Now you're talking to someone who has spent 17 of the last 23 years judging lawyer performance. That's what I do. I do post-conviction relief. So I judge defense lawyers. And is Mr. Cogley effective under current doctrine? The case is called Strickland versus Washington. Under Strickland, the question is, has he transgressed the professional bounds of practice to the point where it would undermine the confidence of a reviewing tribunal? That's reasonably probable that it would do that. And I've had many cases where I have asked no questions in cross-examination strategically, because if I don't ask cross-examination questions, the other side gets no redirect. Because that's how it goes. It's direct of your witness, they get cross, and then you get redirect. If there's nothing that they said that is, or on direct examination, that hurts my theory of the case, then why do I want to give the other side another shot at the witness? Why do I want, if your opponent is making a mistake, let him make it. Sun Tzu used to say, once said that. And as far as what Mr. Cogley was up to, what was his strategy? That's the question.
Yeah, that was my question. What was the strategy?
To do? And obviously, the way things that worked out, I don't know that. He clearly had one, but I think that that things, as that episode developed, changed the way that he was approaching that case, and he rolled with what he got. They ultimately ended up on Enterprise, and
he brought Ben Finney's daughter up, and
he brought her up. Yeah, so I think it's fairly clear that probably Spock had given him information that hadn't been shared with the viewer or with Ms. Shaw, the prosecutor. And I think that he probably suspected that Ben Finney was still alive, and that they would locate him, and that's why they were using that silencing device, and why they wanted the whole bunch of them on Enterprise to begin with. So that was clearly his strategy. And we get zapped in the very beginning of that with the ion pod thing, which, of course, Kirk is like, that's BS, man. It didn't happen that way.
Right.
Well, that's a faked video, and with a guy with a Spock computer rating, at some point in this process, Spock figured out that that was a fake.
Right.
And there's only one way that that's going to happen, and there was only two people on Enterprise at the time with that ability. Spock was one, Finney was the other. So, that's not hard to dope out.
Hmm.
No wonder he didn't spend a lot of time cross-examining anyone. He didn't need to.
And let's not forget, even though he didn't do it, the only other person who had that computer knowledge was James Kirk. What a captain, right?
Right.
He's a great guy.
Let me get a comment from one of our viewers. This is one of our regular viewers, Bill Lamond, and he says, my dad was a civil litigation lawyer and a state circuit court judge for about 40 years. Tori, you have told me more about what it's like in a court than he ever did. Thank you.
Wow.
Well, I appreciate that.
And your comment about Ben Cogley, Samuel Cogley, I could tell you thought about it in a way that I didn't, because I think I gave into TV entertainment Cogley. But even the way you talked about that, I could tell you were thinking about what was going on.
Well, you asked the question, and so I'm judging him the same way that I would judge the performance of a defense lawyer. I've spent years defending criminal defense lawyers' work. That's the majority of my practice. I supervise a department in a large, medium-sized prosecuting attorney's office that's charged with post-conviction or defending post-conviction litigation. And so I have to develop relationships with the defense bar, which is unusual for a prosecutor. And I have to be able to judge the performance of an attorney. I mean, if someone's made a mistake, if they've done the wrong thing, I have to know that, and I have to be honest about that. Then we defend on grounds of prejudice, if possible. And if not, I mean, right's right. You got to cash in your chips and go from there.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's not very common.
Well, there's another attorney that I wanted to ask about, but before we do that, let's take a quick break for a couple of commercials, and then we'll come right back and we'll get back into our discussion with Victoria Avalon. So stay right there.
Attention, people of Earth!
Turned on the TV late last night.
'Cause I felt nerdy.
Saved the galaxy from a fright.
'Cause I felt nerdy. Turned on my TV late last night. 'Cause I felt nerdy. Then my gravity and took flight. 'Cause I felt nerdy.
Exterminate, locate, destroy. I have to go. Having some problems up here. Good luck. Stay safe. See you soon.
And we're back.
Those are good.
And I would say after Samuel T. Cogley, probably my favorite lawyer in Star Trek was the Klingon lawyer from Rules of Engagement, who was after Worf.
And Deep Space Nine?
In Deep Space Nine. And I think that's, for one, I'd love anytime there's an attorney, and it's not just, your buddies or your attorneys now. But I mean, he had such a very interesting approach. I know he's an alien, so the rules are maybe a little bit different for him.
Yeah.
But I mean, as an attorney, what did you think of his strategy in that episode?
Well, what struck me about that particular episode is that you were dealing with an individual who is obviously in a system that he's used to playing a rigged game.
Right.
Yeah.
And once he got shook out of it, I thought that obviously he got Worf out of it. So what he did was effective in the end. One of the things that I learned doing trials, I've done about 75 trials. My record is I've done somewhere between 70 and 75 jury trials.
Yeah.
I've done over 100 appellate actions at all levels of the state courts in Florida. and between 500 and 700 post-conviction evidentiary hearings. So been in court a lot. And one of the things I've learned from all of that is that you have to understand who your audience is.
Right.
And the Klingon, his audience was the judge, who apparently had plenary power, complete power, and he was also kind of like in Rumpole of the Bailey, Worthington Banana, you know, in the episode that they did in the African court, where he's completely run by whatever the president wants of the country that they were in. And this Klingon judge was pretty much the same thing. He was a creature of the system, and he was trying to get the judge to do something that was outside his comfort zone, and that's very difficult. I've managed to do that in the past, to get judges to do things that they clearly did not want to do because I've boxed them in with the law, or I had a better argument on the facts. That's happened. No judge likes to be in that position, and so I thought that particular individual, as a character, as a lawyer in his society, knew his audience and pitched towards his audience, which is what trial lawyers do.
Right. Yeah, that makes me think of the Cardassian lawyer as well, from Tribunal. Yeah, where it's very like 1984. You know, it's very like it's theater. Where it, you know, in Cardassian society, the whole trial is theater. You're guilty already, and now our job is to make the Cardassian public feel better because you're going to die. You know?
Yes, and I had the opportunity to rewatch that one. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I found myself really enjoying it. I had kind of forgotten a lot of the details on it, but having had the chance to rewatch it, it's interesting to see an alien culture's approach to the law.
Right.
And the thing about the Klingon episode was that, you know, you think of Klingons as warriors. You don't think of them as scientists or chefs or whatever, or lawyers. And this guy came into the court approaching like, I am a warrior of the law.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such an interesting twist on what we would normally think of in a courtroom, where you're coming in to do battle like a Klingon would in any other setting. I just curious to know about Klingon cooking shows now, and I am doing battle, and my opponent is this, you know, whatever piece of beef or something. I don't know.
Klingon cooking, they might actually be fighting back though, so you're probably onto something there.
And following up what Alan says, you could probably comment on that. Following up what Alan said, the other thing about that Klingon lawyer was what we always hear, those of us who watch TV law, badgering the witness. He went after Worf and went after Worf and went after Worf because he wanted Worf to show violence. It's like, and then when he hit him, he's like, okay, basically, I'll rest my case.
Well, that kind of thing perhaps is that's a procedural issue. I mean, in our courts, that's objectionable.
Right.
Maybe in their courts, it's not. You'd have to know what the procedural rules are. Kind of like in a Law and Order episode where I'm laughing because they're doing a suppression hearing in the judge's chambers. Well, apparently that's in Manhattan. That's apparently not unusual. In Florida or Illinois, that's unheard of. So,
yeah, the alien laws are different because, as Charles was saying, with the Cardassian lawyer, at the end, spoilers for those who haven't seen it, when basically he's getting congratulated for winning the case of the defendant, he's like, "Oh my God, I'm ruined at worst, and I'm dead at best. Ruined at best and ruined at dead at worst." And he won the case, but you're not supposed to win the case.
Right.
It's just great.
Well, I think the stakes feel higher in that one because in a lot of cases in these courtroom episodes, it's a federation court, which is kind of an extension of how we feel about American courts, where you like to feel that, you know, it's a fair playing ground. You're going to get your fair say.
Right.
You know, you have to
know what you're being accused of.
Right. You think there's it's set up so that if you're innocent, that can be proven and you can go free. whereas, I mean, when O'Brien was in a Cardassian court where it's the exact opposite, where it's weighted against him. So you don't even have that expectation that all you got to do is prove he's innocent. Like, no, they're not going to let you prove he's innocent.
Yeah.
Well, let
Yeah,
me
yeah.
also let me put a twist on that. American courts are not fair.
Mm.
They're weighted toward the defendant, and that's done on purpose.
Right.
The state has the burden of proof beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt.
Good
Right.
The
point.
highest burden in the law to prove you've got to feel good about that verdict. It's got to be something that you have an abiding conviction. We tell our juries that you have to have, in Florida at least, you have to have an abiding conviction of guilt, and that's purposeful. Now, in post-conviction world where I'm at, after the conviction happens, and he's been through direct appeal, the tables are turned. You're presumed guilty now, and now the state gets the benefit of the doubt, and that's when I first started doing post-conviction cases. That was very, very different, but we're conditioned to think that that's fair. Well, no, it's unfair if you're the state, and it should be that way,
Right.
Because the framers, the men who put together the Constitution, wanted to check the power of government. They'd come from a monarchy where the king had unquestioned power, and they wanted to be able to cabin that power, and that's one way that they did cabin that power. And over 230 plus years, we've normalized that as in society as being what we believe to be fair. Well, no, it's unfair to the government, and it should be unfair to the government because we're trying to prevent unchecked state power in society.
And that's interesting too, because in tribunal, it was very much about the state.
Yes.
You know, it was about the good of the state and not of the individual. So, I mean, that's it's interesting. And to me, it raises the stakes because, like I said, we expect the Federation Court to act very much as our own. And like what you're saying, I mean, you've got to prove that someone is guilty of a crime. And I mean, it's very dramatic. A lot of times the courtroom episodes of Star Trek are really just, an excuse for the drama. And I think that's why Measure of a Man for me as a viewer works so well, is because it's about the drama of what's happening with those characters more so than, I think we all would watch it and think, oh, that's not, you wouldn't really have his buddies being the attorneys. Or if not, if I was Picard, I would be objecting to that. And, look, especially a verdict of such magnitude,
Yeah, I mean, you're going to take away Data's humanity,
right?
I mean, there's no way you want people with conflicts of interest to to be litigating the case. And number one and number two. First, I think Picard would have been the best witness for Data, and Riker too. I mean, in fact, if I had been defending Data, I would have had half of the Enterprise crew lined up, to come in and testify. We would have brought his cat in. I mean, I did something like that once in a suppression hearing. It was over a dog, and I had the sheriff's deputy who had done the search with the dog bring the dog in, and we did a demonstration for the judge. It was very effective.
That's awesome.
I would have done things like that to defend Data. If I was prosecuting, I would have wanted to put limits on that. There are doctrines in the law that cabin or allow you to cabin cumulative evidence. And too much of that stuff is going to be cumulative, first of all. Some of it's going to be unfairly prejudicial. In other words, something that inflames the emotion of the fact finder. And that can be true of a judge as well as a jury. So you can try to limit those kinds of things. That cyberneticist, he was a terrible witness. I would have tried to find somebody who had a little bit more humanity and wasn't slobbering at the mouth to disassemble, the sentient android. I mean, that guy came off like a ghoul, and I certainly I would have hesitated greatly to have to build my case around that guy if I was trying to strip data of his humanity.
Right.
And of course, the thing I always wondered about that episode, which is, I always thought it was odd, is Data by that time had been in Starfleet for nigh 20 years. Yet they never, and he was number 3 on the ship. And that is, you must assume he's commanded other missions. So it's like, you just got around to deciding whether he's a quote unquote toaster or not.
Right.
It's interesting.
That doesn't make any sense to me. And not that, but this is Starfleet in the 24th century, you know? I mean, how long have we been in space? How many weird life forms have we found? We're going to now say that artificial life doesn't exist, bro. You know what the hell, Starfleet? You
Right.
know?
But
that just felt artificial to me.
Yeah. I don't, that's such an obvious episode to harp on, but I do have one more question. I was very curious. You just said something very interesting. They've seen so many different life forms, rock creatures, silicon-based life forms, gaseous life forms, energy beings.
Yes.
At the end, when I forget her name, when she made the decision, she basically says, "I'm not sure if Data's sentient, but I know he's not sentient," basically. And what we were led to believe is from that kind of set a precedent for how at least Sung type androids would be treated. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. That was the question. Is that the precedent for the future? What she did?
Well, no, because she's a trial court. Trial courts don't set precedent. Certainly, they would have some kind of intermediate appellate court, and it would surprise me if that cyberneticist ghoul didn't try to appeal her ruling, you know. And it would be interesting to me to see what the appellate tribunal said, because that does establish precedent for that area.
Yeah.
So, of course, we never hear about that, and you know, whatever.
And does that bleed over into civilian life? Because this was a military trial.
Typically, it doesn't. Now, I have used. Well, all right. Let me nuance this. I work in state courts, and federal courts in general have limited precedential value in the state courts. Typically, unless it's an injunction or something along those lines, the decisions of a federal trial court or a federal appellate court don't bind state courts. Typically, it has to be a decision of the U.S. Supreme Court on an issue of our law. I have used. There are two kinds of opinion. There's precedential opinion that binds a lower court. They have to follow it. Decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court are typically precedential because they apply to everybody. And there are persuasive opinions where you can hand this to your trial judge in Chicago and say, listen, this is very persuasive reasoning, and you should follow it for all these reasons. Those are the two different ways that these are. Now, as far as military cases are concerned, those are federal. There is an entire federal military court system, and they have a military court of appeals. That is their intermediate appellate court. And I have used cases from the military court of appeals as persuasive in how they dealt with an issue. In a child pornography case I prosecuted many years ago, and it was on an issue that we didn't have a lot of precedent in Florida on, and it was a Florida case. And that's one example of how you can use non-precedential federal cases, but my judge's hands weren't tied by it.
Right. Okay.
And in fact, when that case got to the DCA level, our District Court of Appeals, and we call it the DCA in Florida, the district court went with a minority view from a state court in New Hampshire, and the federal case law I was using represented a majority view across about 26 states. Our appellate court didn't like it. They didn't go with it. They went with the minority court out of New Hampshire. And that precedent stayed in place. That was precedential throughout the state of Florida. And that stayed in place until the legislature changed the statute. I want to say it was either in just the past legislative session this past year or the year before. And so that had been about 12 or 13 years between those decisions.
Are there other episodes that you guys were that resonate with y'all? You know, that either good or bad law that you think of?
Say that again. I didn't hear that.
I was wondering because Alan had brought up one and Charles had brought up some lawyers and scenarios. I was wondering whether some others that were kind of that stick with you for legal episodes in Star Trek, either good or bad, you know, good or bad examples.
Those are really the only ones that really stick with me. Either good or bad. I mean, I take all that with a grain of salt because it's entertainment, it's drama.
Yeah.
You know, and I suspend disbelief as much as I can and just enjoy the story. I try to do that.
It's funny because I have an engineering background, but I have a love of astronomy, and I've been studying astronomy since I was a kid, and I have to do that sometimes with the science. For example, in court martial, I have a problem because every time Ben Finney pulls those crazy cables and the engines go down, and they're like, "Oh crap, we're going to fall out of space!" Like, no, it doesn't work like that. You don't turn the engines off and drop out of orbit. So I have to do the same thing sometimes with
I got nailed on that in an episode I wrote for Starship Demos back when I was writing for them, where I referred to, and this is embarrassing because my undergraduate degree's in chemistry, and I'd referred to degrees Kelvin, and that was an elementary mistake. It's not.
Wow.
It's just Kelvin. It's not. They don't report it in degrees.
Wow, you were working with you were working with some serious people because not most folks are going to catch degrees Kelvin.
That got caught. It did.
Wow.
It did.
I don't feel so bad now.
Viewers writing us about that. Yeah,
that's great.
You mentioned Bruce Maddox appealing the decision. Now it makes me wish we'd seen a sequel where, I mean, because really, I mean, if I was Bruce Maddox, I'd be like, look, I mean, his buddy was the prosecutor, the prosecuting attorney.
How did he not appeal that? How did he not?
The captain's girlfriend is acting as judge. Like, what is this?
I mean, what a rip, man! What a rigged game that was. Sure. I mean, I can imagine that coming up in front of one of our district courts. You know, one of our district courts of appeal, or one of the divisions of the Illinois Appellate Court. It has 5 or 6 divisions. I can just imagine that right now, right? I can just trying to explain this to a panel of district court judges with a straight face. No, thank you. No, I don't want to be that lawyer.
Like the captain used to date her? Wait a minute. No.
I love it. Alan, Veronica, do y'all have other cases y'all thought about that you were interested in?
Cardassian one was the main one I had been.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You know what that reminded me of? I've seen excerpts of the trial in the 1980s that they did in the Soviet Union after the Chernobyl disaster, and it reminded me of that. That's what it reminded me of. I mean, a foregone conclusion. The whole thing. It was a rigged joke. And that's it. Looked just like that. It was like a Nazi show trial. It was terrible.
Yeah, agree.
You know, in the current Paramount Plus paradigm of Star Trek, where we have lots of different series in production at the same time, and each one of them has a different tone. I have said many, many times on this show that I think that you could do a Star Trek comedy, you could do a Star Trek medical show, you know, like a hospital drama, that kind of thing. And I would love to see a Star Trek courtroom show or something based around the JAG office. So if you were the showrunner, this is going to be a real thing. It's Star Trek JAG. We'll just call it that. How would you like stack the cast as far as like what type of characters would be your main cast?
Well, I'd want to do. JAG was the prototype for something like that, and you'd want to do something like that. You know, whoever your lead is has got to be a charismatic individual, and that's who you're going to build the show around. You're going to build it around whoever your lead trial attorney is. You're going to want to have somebody who's like the district attorney in Law and Order, who's always yelling at him for doing the wrong thing or this thing or that thing. You know, you're going to want to have some defense lawyer that is trying to trip him up all the time, or rotating cast of defense lawyers that come in. You're going to want to take the show on the road. I mean, you're going to want to explore the trek first. You know, you'll want to go and not just do things on the starbase all the time. You'll want to go to various colonies or worlds, or you know, they'll have some murder on a starship or something like that. You know, you'll want to go and have that done there. That kind of thing would be a lot of fun. You could do a lot with that.
I agree. I think that Paramount needs to hire me as a showrunner. Well, you should be the showrunner, and I'll be your assistant. I don't know what I'll do, but I'll do something. And I think it'd be a hugely successful show.
Well, you know, one interesting thing when you guys are talking about a legal show, and I was thinking about when I was prepping for this show, is if you think about it, the Federation, I forget exactly what the number is. The Federation is on hundreds of planets at the time of the original series in TNG. And as you remember, one of the things about joining the Federation is you must agree to a set standard of laws and treatments. For example, you can't have slavery on your planet. I think you can't have monarchies. I think you can't have monarchies. Nowadays, we would say you couldn't treat women differently. And so it would be very interesting to have a JAG show where you're going to hundreds of planets, where in a lot of ways you're enforcing the same moral and ethical and legal standards from planet to planet. But then what are the differences? Because to be in Starfleet, you got to act a certain way. But you know, those planets have different
work. Keith, and how it's going to work is think about that.
Yes.
You know, you're a Starfleet officer, so the fleet is going to have its own justice system, its own quasi-military justice system. But does that carry over to the entire Federation?
It's like different states have different parameters.
Exactly. Yes, Alan. You're going to have you probably have a two-tiered court system. You probably have Federation courts that are across the Federation. And then each planet, each world has its own justice system.
Yeah, you think about, there's two examples I can think of when Nog started getting ready to join Starfleet. He would often say, I'm still a Ferengi. And he would still do stuff that was a little weird by what we would call. And the other example I think of is in TNG when Worf killed Duras. Picard's like, dude, you just murdered somebody on my ship. And Worf said, it was perfectly acceptable according to Klingon law. And Picard's like, okay, you want to give up that uniform? Because you can't be coming here spouting Klingon law when you're a Starfleet officer.
Yes.
That's it. You know, that's a jurisdictional problem, because what law takes place on a starship? Guess what? This is Federation territory, my friend. You just blew it, Ron.
And you'd think two attorneys would be trying to get cases tried on certain planets, because the laws are in their favor.
Well, that would be judge shopping, and there would have to be rules against that too.
Yeah.
For example,
really interesting.
Well, a great example. Let's say I'm standing on one side of the Georgia-Florida line, and you're standing on the other, and I shoot you. Where do we try the case, Georgia or Florida? That's called venue, and there are venue rules for that. And Florida's venue rules are that if you commit the crime and it happen and it's something that happens in two places, venue can be in either place. So Florida would have jurisdiction over the crime because you were standing in Florida when I shot you from Georgia, essentially. I've prosecuted child pornography cases that way, where they emailed child pornography to a police officer in Florida, and that gave us jurisdiction, and we extradited the guy. We brought him here. I had one case. I'm probably talking a little out of school here, but I'll give you the general background. We had a similar case where the defendant lived in Australia. He'd never been in the U.S. ever in his entire life. And it took me about 8 years to do it, but we extradited him back here for a similar set of facts. It wasn't direct child pornography. It's a long and involved story, and I can't go too deep into it. But the bottom line is that because he had those contacts, because he had reached out and he had committed this, he had victimized people in my jurisdiction, we were able to reach out and through the State Department extradite him from Australia to Florida, and he ended up doing about 10 years in a Florida prison.
Wow. And you'd think if this is in the Star Trek universe, you'd be dealing with complex things like transporter clones and time travel, and
yes,
there you go.
Yes,
my body was being possessed by that Klingon at the time. And,
I didn't do it. Yeah,
right.
Data took over the ship for the 10th time, and he's still there. Yeah, and it's so funny. We were talking beforehand. We could probably go 2 hours on the show because there's two things we can't talk about, but when we'd love to have you come back, because two things that crossed my mind was Kirk, especially, always making prime directive decisions on the fly. And then there was a podcast I listened to that said Kirk's Enterprise did not have rear view mirrors because he made a decision, and then they're like, well, Kirk violated the prime directive. Well, did he or not? And he got away with it, but we can't talk about that now. And the other one I really want to ask you about, and I didn't get to it, is that horrible episode Justice from TNG.
Oh my God, that was awful.
But the only thing about that is it was the weird thing. It's a philosophical thing. It was break any law and you get killed. Therefore, nobody will ever break the law. So it's enforced morality. But we can't talk about it now because it's a horrible show, but an interesting concept.
It is an interesting concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't talk about the prime directive given the characters that I write. I have a very checkered history in that regard.
Well, speaking of which, before we get out of here, I wanted to give you a chance to promote anything that you've got coming out that's in the works or that's on its way, either as a writer or as an actress.
Keep your eyes open for Farragut Forward.
I am.
It's going to be amazing. Yeah. I've got to go up and we got the band back together. And I got to go up this summer and see the bridge set that they built for the Starship Farragut. And the costumes it's like 1987, I swear. It's amazing.
For anyone who, just real quick, for anyone who's not familiar with Starship Farragut, it was an original series set Star Trek fan film based out of Georgia at the time, was where they were filming. The sets that eventually turned into Star Trek Continues. Star Trek Continues eventually moved in and started using those sets or components of them. But now Farragut has come back and they're doing a movie era. They're moving their characters forward in time, just like the original series did, which is fascinating. And it looks spot on and cinematic.
Oh, it's amazing. The other thing that I'm involved in is Dreadnought Dominion. I play Maureen Farrell, who is the captain of the Starship Dominion,
right?
And now, and we released very recently In Our Own Time, which was written by Randy Wren, and that was a great script. And it's the first time, I got to sit in the chair on the bridge in Kingsland as the ship's captain. That was a real wow moment. Wow.
Yeah.
And we're going to be filming another episode in February. And across the Dominion universe, there are 3 different productions. Warbird Valdor, which is the Romulans, and they have one starring a crew of a runabout. And this storyline is going to stretch across all 3 continuities, which is it's the first time anybody's ever tried that.
That's really cool.
And I think it's really ambitious.
Wow.
And Gary Davis, our showrunner, and Randy Wren, our writer, have been working very hard on those scripts, and they'll release sometime next year. And if you like that continuity and that series, I think you'll enjoy it. Everybody who is involved in that, I think Josh Irwin's going to come back and do some cinematography for us. Cross my fingers, I might get a chance to do a cameo in the Avalon universe, and that's something. One of those little bucket list things, like, and but that's going to be really good when they finally release that. So those are really the things I don't do as much as I used to, and those are the two companies I'm working with now, and they're both great to work with. I mean, getting back and working with Farragut again, that was, oh
Absolutely.
my God, that was oh my God. I haven't played Yvette Dupree. I never thought I'd play her again when we folded after Homecoming in 2015, and
right.
I stepped right back into into that character and the French accent and everything, and it was fun.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun and super interesting. I really appreciate it.
Yes, this was a fascinating discussion.
I really would love to have you back again because there's so much of the legal stuff we didn't get to talk about.
Sure.
And there's just so much. But I wanted to thank you because the Cogley response showed me you really do. I hate to say this. I was like, oh, she really does know her stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm not the Clarence Darrow. I'm not, but there are things that I've done for a long time that I'm pretty good at.
And it was really fascinating.
Post-conviction review is one of the things I'm pretty good at.
Yeah, it's fascinating to look at it through the law, through a real legal mind. That was really, really, really interesting.
Thank you.
All right, so Victoria, where can people find more of you on the internet?
Well, if you look at either Vimeo or YouTube, most of the things that I've been in are on one or the other. I was the early Farragut episodes are all on YouTube, and I was in 3 of them. I was in Homecoming and The Crossing, and the very first one that I was in that we did in 2013, and they're all on YouTube. In fact, all of the Farragut episodes are worth watching, including the ones I'm not in. I spent a number of years working with Randy Landers in Starship Deimos. I wrote probably 15 or 16 of those episodes, and they're both in Vimeo and YouTube. That's a great company. I really enjoyed working with all of them. And that's where I met you, Charles.
Yeah, and we had Randy on last week, so folks have heard about Potemkin Pictures already. But look up Starship Deimos, where you play the captain.
Well, I did up until the last episode that they released, and Tuck Stevens is their captain now, and I've known Tucker for many years, and I think he was a good choice to succeed me. I think he'll do great. Definitely worth watching. As I've been told, I haven't seen it myself, but I've been told that the last episode was very well received, and I'm very glad for that.
Excellent.
So you should see that. And then obviously you can find Dreadnought Dominion on YouTube. I've been in a number of those episodes. I played Maureen Farrell starting, around 2016. I'm also in an audio drama that Gary and Randy did, Excalibur, and playing the same character.
Yeah.
Those are great fun, and that's a fantastic. If you look up Dreadnought, my favorite episode of Dreadnought Dominion is called "We Are Many," and it's one that Randy Wren wrote and that we shot probably 2 or 3 years ago. It is my favorite by far. It is. I mean, it could have been 3rd season TOS. It could have been.
Oh wow.
The early 3rd season, not the later Spock's brain crazy shit. No, not that. It's late 2nd, early 3rd season vibe, and when I'm asked which one I like the best, it's that one, because that story's got incredible heart, and just you can also see the protagonist, the actress, slap Gary in the face. And that story is that we probably shot that tape probably 12 or 13 times. And poor Gary was just getting smacked. And but he's got such a great sense of humor. He took it so well. But they're a lot of fun to shoot with too. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Alan, where can people find more of you?
Well, you could go to www.cosmicpress, or no, Cosmic Creative. Let's do that. KOZMIC creative.com. And you can see all the podcasts that I do and books that I've written. And Tori, I'll be in touch, and we're going to put together our pitch for, Starfleet JAG, and we're going to send it in to the Paramount people. And it's going to be a big thing. I'm telling you.
I'm
New
down.
hit.
And how about you, Keith?
You can find me on X and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
That's right. If you're in the Atlanta area, on December the 9th, we'll be in 2 different shows. I mentioned this last time, I think, but our 2 favorite shows in Atlanta ended up the same night. And so we had to just pick one and do it. Well, we do those shows a lot, and the creators of those shows talked amongst themselves and worked it out so that we could do both, and then pitched it to us. Said, hey, if you want to be in the first act of this show and then the second act of this show across town, you're welcome to. And so we're like, heck yeah, we'll do it. And so we're gonna be in the first act of the Sinful Variety show at the Red Light Cafe on December the 9th, which starts at 9:00, and we'll be in the second act of the Puck and Puppet show, which starts at 10 at the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta. So
How
look
can
for
that
us.
possibly work out?
Oh, it'll work.
Okay.
We'll go early, and then we'll drive to the other place, and then we'll change clothes and do our other bit in the second half of the show.
I hope you've invented transporters.
Don't
Y'all
stand
are
behind our car.
Y'all are like Bill Maher. Several times I listen to Bill Maher's show, and he'll say, I gotta go, I got a show in Vegas, and he has to like run out of the studio, hop a plane to Vegas.
Right. And where else people find us, Veronica?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And do you have a closing for us this week?
I object.
Hey, that's great. Perfect. Oh, bye, everybody.
done.
Thank you again, Victoria.
Thanks all. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Take care. See you next week.